welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Phil.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the World Team Championship, or WTC for short. We've got a couple of special guests coming on to tell us about their experiences at WTC, an old hand, if you will, without offending him awfully, and a newer player who's only been playing for a very short time.
But before we get to hear from John and Liam, we'll just give you a bit of a summary of our experience at the WTC, what we found over the weekend, who we played and so on. So we went as part of England B, which was the two of us, Alan Wells and Michael Smith. So Michael had been to WTC before, the previous year with England. Alan had also been the previous year for the Netherlands, for Holland. And myself, Alan and Johnny were also the England team at World Open War in Southend last year.
Yeah, just to give a bit of clarity there, Alan was subbing in when he wasn't playing for England. So he is an English player, and he was just filling the spot because of a last-minute dropout last year. It's not that he's dual national.
No, nor is he, playing the passport game and jumping from one country to another.
Exactly, yeah. Or just looking for the best opportunity to place. Before we go into our games, what did you take, Phil?
So I took Brits. I was playing with the Brits. My list was fairly much what you'd expect.
The average British player.
I wasn't the average British player because I didn't take Brengineers. I know Russell looked at this with Bo in one of Bo's videos where Russell basically worked out the average British list, and it was similar. So yeah, 4 Gurkha Power squads, no Brengineers, like I said, 2 Stewarts. I took 2 land mattresses, bit of a novelty factor, almost a bit of so I did.
Yep.
Arguably, if I did it again, I might take a £25 and the land mattress. I took the PPA Jeep, which obviously we in our group, in the team group, we were talking about back and forth beforehand, and there was an argument for taking the Jeep and the flamethrower combo. So yeah, you get an extra dice, but then the way I was using the PPA Jeep is that not quite last line of defense, but it was I need to flame something. And if it's in reserve, for example, it's testing on a 9 because it's veteran. It's only 1 dice I need to be able to pull in order to act, to get that Jeep on the board and flame, rather than if it's a flamethrower in a Jeep combo, you're looking at those 2 dice in succession. So yeah, it was 14 dice. It was fairly standard. I was quite happy with how it did, and quite happy with the list that I put together.
Very nice.
And yourself?
Yeah, I took the classic US build. So I actually dialed
your classic US build, not necessarily what we saw over the weekend, to be fair.
That's true, actually. It is. I don't see many people running US the way I run them, but it is very much a barbecue list. But I had actually turned the grill down a little bit because I decided I was going to do single platoon because I don't like to waste the 35 or 42 points on a second officer. And so single platoon, I took a Stewart because I thought, why not?
Yeah.
The main reason was just because I didn't want to get into a situation where I felt like I needed that offensive capability. It's a great way to hold people back. So I'd thrown a Stewart in, which is why I actually took, instead of taking 5 engineer squads, I took 3 engineer squads and one of the US Army engineer squads that fit in your flamethrower team. So basically I've got 4 squads of engineers in 4 Dodge carriers. And then I knew that there was going to be objectives in place, so I wanted plenty of infantry, and so I took 2 ranger squads as well. And then alongside that, I basically had the inexperienced officer with a buddy, inexperienced rocket launcher, recce Jeep, and a tractor.
You obviously brought your tractor.
Yeah, you got to bring the tractor. That heavy machine gun every now and then. Generally, it's not great, but every now and then that little heavy machine gun will knock something out, like a truck with engineers in, where the machine gun wouldn't have rolled the 6. And yeah, I don't leave home without it generally. I think I also had a heavy mortar was the other thing. So 16 dice in total, which is fewer than I usually play with my US, to be honest. And I did feel it at times, but I was quite happy with the list on the whole. But I think I probably won't bring it out exactly the same again if I do bring it out, which I will.
Of course you will.
But going into the games, do you want to go through your summary then, Phil? What was the first game we played?
Yeah, so it was 6 games over the 2 days. So game 1 was key positions. We were playing the Welsh. So the round 1 draw had been done in advance, so we knew that we were up against Wales. We weren't obviously sure what 4 lists of the 5 that they were taking. So my game, I played Paul Wickens, and that finished in a draw. It was a great game, always is when Paul and I play. Really enjoyed that. That was a well-fought draw on both sides. And yourself, Johnny?
I was playing Gary Morgan, who I know quite well from the tournament scene in the UK. He's at most of the big tournaments. I decided to risk it, sort of risk big, win big, and stacked the table with all the objectives on one side, and then, of course, lost the roll-off. So it was... I thought I was going to lose the game from the very beginning, and then there was one point where actually I was winning, and then he got a lucky hit with his multi-launcher, took out 2 squads in a single hit, well, in a single fire order, and then took the victory again. So it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. It went from certain defeat to potential victory, back to certain defeat over the course of 6 turns. So as much as it was disappointing not to win, it was a really fun game to have that big swing both ways.
Mm-hmm. So we unfortunately lost that round as a team, which meant that we ended up playing Spain 3 in round 2, which was sectors. I played Fernando, who had a British Gurkha list. I played Paul against a British list. So my first 2 games were against British Gurkhas. I was playing British Gurkhas. So it was a familiar territory. I beat Fernando in that game. Again, really enjoyable game. Yeah, so that was a nice, sort of start to the day, a draw and a win for me.
Yeah, and that was one of the interesting things with this year being a random draw rather than a pairing system. It was just complete luck of the draw who you played against. And in game 1, I think I forgot to mention there, but Gary was also playing USA, so it was blue on blue. And in the second game, I got to play Christofen of Spain 3, who was running Japanese, which would have been the matchup that I probably would have avoided with my flamethrower list. So sectors, it was a good game. Managed to pull out a win in the end, but it was by no means a certain victory for me. It was very much sort of a hard-fought battle, that one. But good opponent, fun game with an intimidating spigot motor was the key feature, I think.
Cool. As a team, we won that round. So we were on 1 loss, 1 win from the first 2 rounds. So we played Denmark 1 in round 3, the final game of day 1. I played Michael F. This was timely objectives. I lost that one. I went ahead early on. The first 3 rounds I was ahead, and then round 4 we were drawing on victory points, and then Michael managed to see it home to get the win at the end of the 6 turns. But again, really enjoyable game, really nice opponent, and played in a really good spirit. Really hard, challenging, but good, good game of spirit. And yourself, Johnny?
Yeah, the Denmark one. They're a very good team. I was playing David from that team, and he was also playing US. So again, it was the second mirror match of the day, but very different build. So whereas I'd gone very sort of flamethrower heavy, and with a Stuart, he'd actually included a 105 Sherman, and he also had a Weasel as well, which is a Recce armored carrier, which is a fun little unit. But it was timely objectives, and I had Rangers, so I just rushed the Rangers on, rushed engineers up to the third objective, and then basically sat on the objectives for the whole game. While we had a good tussle across the rest of the table, but because I'd got to the objective first and could go down with veterans on it, he really was on the back foot. And so I managed to get a win out of that one quite convincingly on the victory points. But as I say, there was a good tussle going on for the sort of the kills and stuff. I mean, his 105 was being incredibly intimidating, but I managed to pull out the win on that one. So it was a great game.
So despite Johnny winning that round, that game, unfortunately, we did lose that round as a team. So we finished the day on 2 losses and 1 win. So going into the second game or second day and round 4, we were up against USA 2. I played George against a US list. Great game, real back and forth all the way through. Wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go until we counted it up. It was a draw. We needed the winner needed to win by 3 points. I was 2 points ahead, so I was one point away from that draw being a win. But really nice game in that. That was in penetrating strike, which is basically like double envelopment, but you don't leave the board. You just need to stay in your opponent's deployment zone to get the extra points at the end. And yourself, Johnny?
Yeah, I was playing Christian, who was running a French list, which is a really fun list. Lots of cavalry, engineers and trucks. And the mistake I made was that we both had decided to do the same thing, which was just to rush into the opponent's zone, but he had more dice than me. And so he had 3 howitzers to stop my advance, which were a bit intimidating, but actually weren't the key factor. The key factor was he was as fast as I am in my trucks, but had more dice. And so ultimately I was on the back foot. What I should have probably done was played a defensive game, knowing he was going to come at me with his horses. Rather than outflanking, I probably should have reserved and just countered his attack. But it was a fun enough game. I had ultimately, I had fun, so I can't really complain too much. But unfortunately, it was a loss for me because of my tactical error there.
Yeah, you were playing on the table next to me, and I remember looking over on about turn 3 to see all of his cavalry in your backline. I was like, what's going on there? That's not meant to happen.
Yeah, I wasn't too worried about it as well because what he did, because he had so many units there, I had the multi-launcher looking down that back line, and this is what Gary had done to me in the first game. He'd got that lucky multi-launcher hit and took out 2 units, and I thought, well, I'm going to be rolling 5 dice here because he's got 5 units. And I didn't get a single 6. And so I think the entire game, I probably rolled about 20 dice with the multi-launcher and didn't get a single 6. And so really, I was in for a hiding because I had, as I say, I had less units.
So we also lost that round as a team. So we then played USA 3 in round 5. This was Heartbreak Ridge. I was playing Major, who had a US Marine list. Yeah, Stuart and Marines and BARs and the multi-launcher, as you'd expect. So I won that game. Again, lovely guy. I'd been chatting with Major throughout the weekend. We met up with him on the Friday, and whenever we saw him in between games in the evenings, we were chatting away. So it was really nice to play him. Really lovely guy. Really enjoyable game.
Brilliant. Yeah. In my game, what game were we on? 4?
5.
Yeah, in my game 5, I was playing Mike, the captain of USA 2? 3. Yeah. Mike, the captain of USA 3. It was a really interesting list he brought. He brought very high order dice count, Soviets, so everything was inexperienced. He brought inexperienced infantry. He brought an inexperienced Stuart, an inexperienced armoured car, I think it was the BA-10, and then he had a howitzer and a heavy mortar. And so it was a really interesting list, and he basically just rushed it all forward in Bren carriers as well, inexperienced Bren carriers. And we just fought over the middle objective effectively. And I ended up coming out with a win on that one. Just basically, there was a few failed order tests. I killed a few units here and there. And ultimately, it just came down to I had more stuff in the middle, as well as sort of killing a few extra dice. But it was by no means a one-sided game. And it was an interesting table, that one, because it was one of the ones where you've got the high walls. And so it's not just like hard cover. It's if you get into the wrong position or if someone rushes around the side, you lose line of sight to them, which makes it just a little bit more interesting. It
was the Italian village table, wasn't it? So yeah. if people have looked on Facebook and seen the tables, it was the Italian village one. Yeah, that was. I enjoyed that table, and it was a nice table to play on.
The only issue I had with it, which was we'd blocked the road in the middle of the road, and it was run diagonally, but that was also the exact center of the table. So
yeah.
The table and the mission combined to mean that the central objective was on this big pile of rubble, which the captains had agreed was impassable, which made it just a little bit more interesting in terms of being able to surround it to stop your opponent getting onto it.
Yeah. So as a team, we won that round. So we were going into the final round with 2 wins and 3 losses. We played Sweden 2, which was meeting engagement. It was quite nice actually to finish, the 6th game on meeting engagement where you don't have to think as much as maybe some of the other missions. I played Stefan, who had a German list, a lovely guy. That ended in a draw. I was feeling fairly comfortable, sort of turn 4, turn 5, and then I maybe got a little bit complacent, and he managed to sneak a few dice to get the draw. But again, lovely game, lovely guy. Yeah. So I finished overall on 2 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. So the loss was against Denmark 1. So I was really happy, with that as an overall performance over the 6 rounds.
Pretty good performance there, Phil. Well done.
You. Cheers.
Yeah, my last game was against Andreas from Team Sweden 2 as well, obviously, because we're on the same team, playing the same team. And he was running Brits. So this was the first Brits I think I faced the whole weekend, which was really nice after World Open War where I'd faced nothing but Brits. It was really nice to go to a competitive tournament and not play Brits for most of the games. But it did mean, obviously, now I'm facing the land mattresses that were allowed and the sort of the Paragurkas.
Yeah.
And also a couple of Brengineers, everyone's favourite. It was probably, up to this point, I'd had 5 really enjoyable games, but I think this was actually one of my favourite games of the weekend, just because he was a very good opponent. He played very cleanly. He did a lot of things that sort of you would recommend new players do. Things like sort of declaring exactly what you're going to do. The way he was measuring things were very, very clean and crisp, so that I knew, no doubt, he's moved that Bren carry exactly 9 inches. And I think that's probably why I enjoyed that game so much, because it meant I could just sort of relax, trusting that, actually, I trust that this guy's actually measured that right. I trust that he knows the rules well. And I wasn't sort of paying attention to his army rules as much. I did the classic thing where I just sort of castled up in one corner, and he went wide, which meant that I could sort of focus my force against a small part of his force. There was sort of bad luck both ways for both of us, good luck both ways for both of us, which ultimately led to a draw in that round.
So as a team, we won that round. So we finished as a team overall on 3 wins and 3 losses. Johnny, what was your personal record over the weekend?
Yeah, so I finished with 3 wins and 1 draw and 2 losses, which is slightly above 50-50. So it's slightly better than the average bear, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But equally not 6 wins. So I've got something to work towards.
Sure. But a good set of results, and well done as well on that one.
Thank you very much, sir.
So as a team, we finished 10th, which we were, I think it was fair to say, we were a bit disappointed with. We had 3 wins and 3 losses as a team. We were hoping to be, somewhere around 6th or 7th, I would think, realistically. So a little bit lower than we expected. That said, for 2 of us, it was our first time at the WTC, not the first time playing, at an international event. Obviously, we were both at WoW, but the first time at the WTC. But yeah, something to, some moments to be pleased with, and overall performance, something to aim for in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. But most importantly, Phil, did you enjoy the weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed it. I think the 3 key factors for me was getting to play international players who I wouldn't normally get to play. Getting to play at a good competitive level over 6 games. And I said something similar to that after WoW when we did that episode. And going overseas as well was great. Just going abroad to play in an event was really good. So it ticked the boxes in terms of all of those 3. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And yourself?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. I thought it was smoothly ran. So well done to everyone involved in that, the whole TO team, and of course the overall organisers for the WTC, because there's all the different systems. So Dave Nolan overall organised the thing, and then we had Dan, Pete and Spurley running the bolt action part.
And Craig as well.
And Craig, sorry, yes. Don't forget Craig. But yeah, the overall, it was a really well-run tournament. I really enjoyed playing all the players that I played. I thought it was really nice to meet all the international players as well. And I thought the venue was quite good. Sort of having everything in the one place is really nice for a tournament where you sort of, the commute from the hotel room to the gaming hall is less than 5 minutes walk.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it so much that I actually went home and started writing the qualifier pack for World Open War, because I'm really looking forward to the next international event.
So for those of you that don't know, so World Open War is an international event that's held in October in the UK in Southend. Johnny is the England rep, so he's responsible for liaising with Russell Wright, who's the event organizer, and also responsible for selecting the England team. So you've come back, you've written the pack for the WoW qualifier. So what can we expect to see for that WoW qualifier, Johnny?
Yeah, so we're looking at a date of the end of May. We're going to be doing it at Southend at the SSWG club. So Russell's kindly offered to both referee and give use of the club, which obviously is going to be a really nice advantage for the English players, because it means we're going to be playing on the actual tables we'll be playing on at World Open War, alongside having the actual referee. So the rules should be ruled the same for both the qualifiers and the actual tournament. So that should hopefully give us that little edge we need this year. And effectively, it's going to be sort of bring your filth, full competitive, exactly same restrictions as World Open War. So it'll be 1,100 points, single platoon, generic only. And it'll be a 5-game event. So that should hopefully nicely split the pack. And then effectively the top 3 players are going to be asked to form the team for World Open War.
Although you have put in a little clause with regards to the nations to be played, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things coming off the back of WTC, and also just sort of from World Open War last year, one of the things I realized is, because you have to have 3 different nations, your best players might not be the best at those nations. If you just took 4 people who are always coming in the top 4 places, but all running Brits, that might not give you the best possible team. And so the idea is that effectively, if our top 4 placings, let's say, are Brits, US, Japanese, then your first player who's playing Brits, your US player who's 3rd, and your Japanese player who's 4th would form the team to give us a nice, basically, so that the players can play to their strengths rather than someone having to learn a brand new army, which also, just from a tone perspective, I think it'll make the qualifiers quite fun because I imagine we'll see some of the players that we don't often see might be trying new nations because it might improve their chances of qualifying.
Mm-hmm. No, it's really interesting. Cool. And when can we expect to hear about it and see the pack and so on?
So I've actually been able to get that live between our interviews and recording this segment. So if you head over to Facebook, you'll be able to find it on there, either through the Tommies page or by searching for Team England qualifiers. If you're not on Facebook and you are interested in attending, you can always email us at tabletoptommies@gmail.com and I'll send over the pack direct to you. As I say, Russell's going to TO it, so that means that I can also compete for my place in there.
Quite right, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And again, if I'm on the team, the captain is something that I have to decide, but it won't necessarily be me, whether I'm on the team or not.
As the rep, it's not the same thing as saying you're the rep and the captain.
Exactly, yeah. The rep's purely responsible for forming the team and sort of liaising between the team and the TO. Once that captain's in place, the captain's job is sort of to liaise on the rules side, etc. So any rules queries or selection queries, they always do a captain's chat, the same as WTC. There's a captain's chat, so we can have these sort of FAQs and a living FAQ document. But I'm really looking forward to it this year. I think it'll be a lot of fun because last year was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, so if you haven't listened to our episode when we did the debrief back in October, yeah, go and have a listen. But yeah, it was great. And it was different to the WTC as well. You know, they both have their own different subtleties and quirks and nuances and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really good for the community to have two international tournaments that are just slightly different. And we see that they're different because if we look at WTC, the Spanish team have won for the last 4 years, I think.
That's
Whereas at World Open World, the Danes won that one.
Yep.
And I imagine next year at World Open World, there'll be a different winner again because it is, as you say, it's a slightly different tournament to WTC. But shall we move on to our interviews?
Yeah, that's enough prattle from us. So like we said at the start, we've got a more experienced older hand, John Ross, captain of USA 1. And we also have Liam, who was part of the England C team this year. So without further ado, we'll hand over to the next section.
Fantastic. Over to our roving reporter.
Which I think was me. We're delighted to welcome John Ross, who's captain of this year's USA 1 team and previous years as well, John?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how many years have you been at the WTC for now?
This was the third year, so I did it starting in Cork.
Okay. Fantastic. And how was WTC 2024 Granada for you?
I think it was the best yet. It's a great venue, as you know, and Granada in Spain is amazing, right? So the food's great and it's so cheap. And the weather was particularly mild this year, even though we were earlier. And the venue's nice and the hotel's fine. So, you know, all the kind of the heavy lifting parts of a tournament, all I thought went really, really smoothly. But, you know, a big change this year is the amount of people focused on the tournament. So you had Dan and some of the juggernauts, Pete and Spurley and Craig, obviously. And you had that. So you had more people focused on the tournament, both before and during, than we've had in years past. And you get any people in a room all at one time, and you need a pretty big cast in order to make sure everything is moving smoothly. I thought they did brilliantly.
Yeah, obviously we haven't been before, but it was very obvious this year that you had, you know, the team that were organising the overall event for the weekend, and then also the guys, you know, Dan Spurley and Pete very much running the bolt action event on the weekend, but also all the prep work beforehand in terms of the pack, the list checking, the captain's chat, answering all the questions and so on. So it was, from our perspective, it was very, very well run logistically, both, you know, before and during the event as well.
Have you guys seen my tournament players' Bill of Rights?
I have come across that, actually. I think the Snafu team have talked about it on their podcast before, because I think they brought it up as like, this is a really good starting point if you're looking at running a tournament. It's a really nice place to start in terms of a mindset to have.
Yeah, so we wrote that, after years of going to tournaments where you leave home and you travel and you just got costs and travel expenses and, the expense of dealing with your spouse because you're not home, you're home stuck with the kids and in all of it, there's a lot of prep goes in all, all the effort. And then you go there and the venue's too hot or it's too cold or everyone's shoved right on top of each other so you can't move. And it starts late. People come back late from lunch. The pack's confusing. I mean, you guys are nodding because you've been through this, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So after years of complaining, there's a stronger word there, that's complaining. One night after a particularly bad one of these events but you get to the end and they can't figure out the score and then they announce the winner and it's totally not the winner because they got it wrong and all the disasters take place, right? So we wrote this thing which was, what should a tournament player expect? And so it began kind of like, to the extent that the players put all this time and energy and capital and all the things that they do in order to come, we should be equally prepared. And it's sort of this fair, equitable relationship between the tournament organizer and the folks. You look at WTC, I mean, there were 18 teams of 4 for Bolt Action, plus probably equivalent for Middle Earth and for Star Wars Legion. Huge venue, all that terrain, all the player packs, all the FAQs, all the prep. You just think about the thousands of hours that went into making sure that when you showed up there, and you walked in, all you really had to focus on was your matchups and trying to play well. And I think that's a great tournament.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the size of the team is a huge factor there because, as you say, if it's 1,000 hours of work, one person can't do it. 2 people, it's 500. The extra, just spreading the load makes such a difference. And I think it does show that there's a lot of people there. And also, it's the people that you're seeing in a lot of tournaments. Like, these are experienced hands.
Well, that's a great point because sometimes you'll go to a store or something where the people are organizing, but they're not players. And they don't know how to ferret out an error or something confusing in a tournament pack, or they don't know how to make a rules call, right?
Yeah.
So you get the judge standing over there with the rule book, you're probably in trouble. So bringing experienced, high-end tournament players, people who play a lot, to an event to both run it and be judges, boy, that is usually the sign it's going to be a great event because they know exactly what calls to make both before and after.
Absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, the few times that I did ask for, a referee's decision, it was there, it was on the spot, it was quick, very decisive. There wasn't a back and forth. It was, what's the situation? What's the decision we need? Decision was made, bash, off you go. And certainly been at other events in the UK where, like you say, maybe it's at a game store and the people running it aren't regular Bolt Action players, or it might be someone who's starting out, which is fantastic to see, but then their decisiveness in making that call maybe isn't there. Whereas, because of the guys who were refereeing and their experience as players, you got that decision quickly. You were able to move on with the game. Both players were happy. Maybe didn't go, wouldn't have gone in both persons' direction. One person's going to be more happy than the other, but it was like decision made, off we go. So,
and that's what you want, right? You don't want a bunch of agonizing emotion. Let's make a call, let's roll, and let's keep moving. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I called a judge during all 6 games, maybe 3-4 times total.
Yeah,
and in every instance, it was mostly a language issue.
Mm-hmm.
Just a confusion which is a WTC thing, and you really do have to put that into perspective because whatever problems you're going to have at a local event where everyone speaks the same language.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got people that are speaking 6 or 7 or 8 different languages. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many different languages you guys got in the UK. I can't understand half of the UK folks.
Officially one. Well, yeah, officially one.
I won't make fun of any particular part of the UK. I love you all. You all are great, but it was a little tricky. But anyway, you understand my point, right? It's like you try to have a conversation, and the judge can come over and make that call and speed it up in a way that might have been very difficult or confusing trying to do it on your own. So I thought that was great. Hey, I got a question for you guys. What did you think of the tables?
So again, we haven't been before. We'd certainly seen the pictures from previous years and the criticism, which seemed to be fair in previous years, that they were a little bit sparse and weren't, particularly imaginative. This year, possibly the opposite. There was actually quite a lot of terrain, and there was quite a lot of terrain on the table in terms of mass. In terms of actually playing it, no issue, no major issues at all from me. I think there was one table we played 2 games on where there was only one terrain type. It was basically it was a winter table where you only had woods. That said, what you need to factor in is that all of this terrain's been made. You've got four identical tables times 9. and it's a huge undertaking to prep all of that terrain, get it over from Ireland, to Spain and get it set up. So I certainly didn't walk away thinking, oh yeah, no, those tables weren't brilliant. And I think since the event, we're a week out now from the actual event, there really hasn't been much noise or chatter on Facebook in the way that in previous years, witnessing as from the outside, the terrain conversation's been going on and on, both over the weekend when the photos were taken and people put them on Facebook, and then after the event.
Yeah, I think it was actually the opposite. I think any of the photos that got posted, the feedback on the tables was generally quite positive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, they weren't playing on them, but as someone who played on them, I thought they were generally fine.
Yeah.
And my only complaint was the same as yours, Phil, where that one table that only had woods, it's a nice change to do it, to try playing on a table with just woods. But the second game on it, I thought, well, this is just a little bit dull now. And that was my only, funnily, my complaint with the tables wasn't the tables themselves. It was that actually the pairings led to teams playing on the same table lots of times. Like the Swedes, I think, played 3 games on the same table, which I thought was a bit of a shame. But to be fair, it was an all right table, so it could have been worse.
So I agree with you guys. I thought the tables were, some of them were brilliant. A couple of different tables, and one of the Italian village table was really, they were beautiful. They were really thematic, right? Everything's sort of matched, and the angles made you think. It wasn't. You couldn't use right angles in order to kind of guess where things were on the table when it shifted a little 45 degrees to an angle that kind of it prevents some pre-measuring effects.
Yeah.
I think that if you've ever hosted your own tournament, whether it's your first or your fifth, terrain is always a journey.
Yeah.
You're never done.
Yeah.
You're always building for the next event, right? And so you think about what he did. So Dave Nolan cast and painted all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Not
crazy,
just for us, for Star Wars and Middle-earth, and those Star Wars tables were beautiful, right? And you think about how many hours it took to get that. So yeah, the tables had been light in the years past, and they got better last year, and I thought they were great this year. And maybe one of them might have been a little too much, but they were all playable. They were all really pretty. And my guess is that winter table will have more stuff on it than just trees next year.
Yeah, I imagine so. Well, it's funny because when people complain about too much stuff, I imagine you probably could have just siphoned a little bit over to the woods table and just thrown on a ruin or something just to give people a little bit of variety.
And picking up on your earlier point, John, about what was noticeable at the WTC was the TOs were very experienced players. When it came to the tables were set up on the Friday by a range of players from different countries, setting up the first of each of the 4 tables, and then Dan, the head TO, came over, gave it a proper thorough look, moved things around, made sure he was happy with it, and then it was obviously copy and paste for the others. But my point there being that it was experienced players who were having that first stab at what table do I want to play on that's going to be balanced and fair if I was on either side, and then you had that experience perspective from Dan as the head TO, making sure he was happy with it, giving it the thumbs up, and then we moved on and made sure that we replicated that across the next 3 down the line.
So in the Warhammer 40K world, are you guys 40K players?
No,
not anymore.
Not anymore. So I played many editions.
Okay.
I have thousands of dollars worth of toys sitting in the cases. But in the current edition, you go look over a 40K table, right? They have regimented this thing down for competitive players. So everything's perfectly equal. There's only one basic terrain type you ever see. The objectives are these huge circles, right? The whole table, the mat doesn't matter anymore. Buildings in the middle of the street, they don't care, right? It's become abstract.
Okay.
And I find that so strange because we play with these highly detailed, realistic looking miniatures, to the extent that a space orc is realistic. But I mean, they're true to scale. They look like they belong. They look like they fit in a universe. And then you go play on a table that looks, hell, it could just be markers. Just that almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And yet we play in a World War II game, in a highly competitive game. A lot of players came there to win, right? And you play on tables that were not symmetrical. And the one thing that I haven't heard over the years, and I'm so glad, is people griping that their loss was as a consequence that they got the wrong side of the table.
Yeah, I have had that a couple of times, but it's usually when it's paired with a terrible mission. So I have heard that happen where And I remember one year at one of the tournaments, there was like, they chose to play envelopment where only one side's trying to get across, and the defender had trenches and then a big no man's land of no terrain in front of them. And that was just carnage. I mean, I think it was an open event, so I think it was a lot of fun still. But I do remember that one. It's players sort of nudging the TO and saying, I'm not sure this mission matches this table.
Well, so I mean, if you looked at the tables, like all the roads, there were lots of pop marks.
Yeah.
So zip across the road, and there was a lot of thought that went into the layouts of those. I thought they were almost universally great.
Yeah, and I think that's the experience, isn't it? The experience showed at this one because I really liked that setting up period where we're setting up and the captains could go to the TO and say, this terrain bit here doesn't make sense. And then Dan could come over and say, yeah, you're right, we'll just nudge that to the side. And I thought that was a really nice way that sort of like, it also is probably quite good for the TO because it means they're not going to get those gripes after the tournament because the captains had their opportunity to gripe beforehand. And so I think it led to some really nice layouts.
The little captains meeting in advance is great. So in years past, there was this little mini meta where you match the lists, one down, you put one down, right? I mean, you kind of like trying to fake out getting your strongest list against their weakest combo, right? We didn't do that this year. It was just totally random. But what that allowed us to do is be more relaxed and focus on the table. Because there's not a rule for everything, How do you want to play this hill? How do we want to play this wreck that's sitting in the middle of the pop mark in the road or whatever? And that took a lot of stress off as a captain, I thought, and I thought it was brilliant.
I was going to ask about that because obviously in previous years you have had that matchup system where you've been able to put your list down. The opposing captain then puts one they want to play. This year it was very much, it was face down and random. It's interesting from your perspective that made it easier and took the stress away. Having been to WoW in World Open War in Southend in October, one of the things I think Johnny and I both enjoyed was that element of you put your list down and then you wait and see what your opponent is going to present to you to play. And obviously when Johnny was captain, when we were talking it through beforehand, it was like, well, Phil, I'm going to throw you under the bus to see what you get because I've got another list here that I really don't want to play against their Japanese list, for example. So we'll shove you down first and we'll see what happens next. So I can see it both ways. Yeah.
So I agree with you. I mean, the little mini matchups were fun. And of course, leading up to the event, you have endless conversations about what's your go forward list, what's an all-comers list, what's your hammer, what's your amble, right? I'll give you an insight. So last year we went and I miraculously, or because I was just amazing at the game tactics, I got every matchup I asked for, literally exactly the way I want. And we didn't hit a podium. So I don't know that it mattered that much. And then this year, which is funny, is I had a player who was supposed to come from the United States, say these stuff, we've been talking up, and then he went silent on me a couple of days before. He just didn't show up. Okay. So we had to go into the singles and recruit somebody, beg him to stay and play. And Felix is a German, but he'd lived years in the US. And so he had so we adopted him as the member of USAT1, but because no one had seen his list beforehand, when we went into our matches, that didn't seem fair. So I would play his up and let him match to it. And he won 4 of 6 games. So
brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So USA captain of Team 1 this year. What was your involvement in the other 2 USA teams? Because there were 3 that went this year.
So Dave does this thing where he volunteers you to be the team recruiter for your country. And so a couple years ago, he asked me to recruit teams to be on USA teams for the US. I host a bolt action page and, I send things out. I go to events and I give out little flyers for people to join, and with the idea of recruiting as many teams as possible. So my official role, I guess, is like what do they call it when people like, this girl and this boy would be great together, let's get them married.
Like a matchmaker,
right? So that's what I'm doing. All these people say, hey, I want to go, right? And then I'm looking at them and I'm trying to put people, onto teams. And the issue with the US is, it's a lot of people, but we are geographically spread really wide.
Yeah.
And we do not have the tournament frequency that you have in a lot of countries in Europe. So some of the people who played on teams had never met before they showed up in Granada.
Okay.
That's fun.
And I would say that, maybe there was a couple of guys in Texas or a few in Spain. No one who played on my team lived in the same city. So we didn't have the Americans aren't going to have the same sort of ramp up to the event that a lot of the Europeans can, because they can play as a group, the same club, they practice all the time, they go to the same tournaments, they sort of know everybody. And that makes it tricky. And then the other thing I have to do is I have to go through this criteria to make the team.
Okay.
Criteria, all right? Number 1, do you have a valid passport?
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are, right? Number 2, can you afford to go?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it's going to be $2,000. It's probably not, but it's going to be $2,000. If you don't have that, you can't go. And number 3 is, will your boss and or wife and or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, will they let you go?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then finally, the last question is, hey, do you actually know how to play this game? And so the U.S. teams end up being that funnel ends up narrowing you down for a lot of people who are super interested, but the people who can actually go, it's not always a match for people either in the same clubs or the same community or even the same skill set. So it makes it tricky for us. That's a rather lame justification for our here. Wow.
We'll edit this bit so it's seamless.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
I thought you were going to come in with a question there, Phil.
I almost was, and then it went, to be honest.
I mean, there was a thing that you were talking about over the weekend, which was you were asking the players how many games they'd played in a year. And I thought that was really interesting. That really got me thinking. And I've decided that this year I'm going to tally up how many games I actually played, because I estimated about 100 last year, but that's purely an estimate. So, I mean, what was the thinking behind that question?
Well, so we had 9 American players get to Spain. We had 8 show up. I had to beg one to play, but that to me is miraculous, because in years past, that funnel separated down, and I'd get down to the very end, and then I was calling other team captains saying, "Hey, do you have an extra guy from the UK or extra Italian or Frenchman or whatever to play with us?" Because it was so difficult to get a full team to go. So I'm super happy that we had 3 full teams. But if you look at our players, and I were to ask that question of our players, my guess number would be 30. Average would be 30. And if I were to ask that question of the juggernauts, or maybe Bo and his team, or maybe, some Spain won, that number might be 100, 200, 150, And so it's a function of the US meta and the way everything is so spread out. I'll give you a great example. So we've got Adepticon coming up, which is a big tournament up in Chicago, right? Right. The cost to go to Adepticon, to fly up there, because it's not close, 80% of the country cannot drive there, right? So you're talking probably $1,000 in order to attend that tournament. What's it cost to drive over and go to the Juggernauts, tournament for someone in the UK? £100? I don't know. So it becomes a real barrier to frequent competitive play, and I think it's showing up in a lot of our guys' scores.
Yeah. And I guess on that basis, then, absolute credit to USA 2 for how they performed over the weekend and their placing, because, given what you just said, if the USA individuals are not playing as much as maybe the European individuals are, then you've got teams being put together who aren't necessarily geographically close to each other from the same club. USA 2 did very well, all things considered, in their final placings over the weekend.
Well, so they are the exception to this. They're all from Maine.
Okay.
Which is one of the smallest states in the United. Why Maine got all these bolt action players? I have no idea. But, Matt and his crew, they did a really good job, and all credit to them. Going into the final round, we played Denmark for what I thought was 3rd place.
Okay.
So had we done well against Denmark 1, I thought we could have had a chance at a podium, and I was very, very proud of our team for all the reasons that we discussed. Yeah, turned out to be not the case. They spanked us and sent us back down to the middle where we belonged, I guess. But for the American teams, that's actually a lot of progress from where we were a couple of years ago, and I'm super proud of that.
Good. And we played both USA 2 and 3, and great games. And USA 2 won the round against us, England B. We came out on top of USA 3, but great games and great players, and hard competitive, but it wasn't niggly, that there wasn't, those flashpoints and so on that you maybe get in other situations where you're both going at it and it's a bit contentious. It was certainly for me, those 2 rounds were really, really enjoyable.
So there's a particular tournament player type And I'm sure you bumped into them over the player type who is, they're really good, they're very competitive, and they push all the edges. So they'll move, and they'll move very loose in a way that looks like it's giving them a competitive advantage. Or they'll challenge someone on a rule that they know is right. But if it's an inexperienced player, maybe they'll second guess themselves. And so they use kind of a bully approach. Bullied their way through a game, which is, it's borderline cheating. It's just pushing the edge, you know. If I've got a tank and I'm going to move it, I just take my tape measure and I just pick it up and move it over there. And I don't do it precisely. Like all the kinds of things you will see some very, very top performing players do. You guys bumped into this? Yeah. I don't think we had any of those on any of the teams this year. They do exist in the US, but just none of them affording it.
Yeah, there was no bendy tape measures when you're meant to be moving in a straight line, or your tank that drifts, you know, an inch to the right or the left when it's again moving in a straight line. Yeah.
I have played some folks at competitive games, you know, for 40K or for Warhammer when it was still the New World or whatever it is now, right? and all these games, and occasionally on a top table in a very competitive tournament, you'll bump into a player like that, and everybody knows them, and everyone hates playing them, and yet they do tend to do well because they can use those tricks to kind of push the envelope in their favor. You know, I have no tolerance for that, and I hope that all the folks that played against USA, whether we won or lost, felt like all three teams were good gentlemen, were playing the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is such a shame when you have players like that who are pushing the bounds with their elastic tape measures, etc. It's just such a shame because what happens is someone who's quite new plays against them, has a bad experience, and then the entire competitive community gets tarred with that brush. And it's just such a shame because actually the best players are playing incredibly cleanly. And this is what, from my perspective, I'd rather lose a clean game than win a game where sort of realistically you've basically cheated.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like there's nothing on the line here, right? There's a trophy and the bragging rights that last about a day or two. And maybe, and then it's over, right? There's literally nothing on the line. No one's life is going to change dramatically as a consequence of any of this. And like I'm there with you.
It's the mid-tier players who are the worst. When you have a mid-tier player like that who's fighting over 7th place versus 8th place, and they're pulling out all the tricks, and it's like we're not even playing for a trophy over here.
There's been some times when I said last year we played the very last team we played. They were not going to podium, but they were just going for it. And it was like, man, just can we just stop and go have a beer? Yeah, nothing's good. But last year, 2 of my players, we got deathly ill, food poisoning, I think.
Oh wow!
Okay. It was coming into day 2. I think we were in 4th or 5th place, and we were so excited the night before. And night, he and I were throwing up, and it was horrific. And I went to Dave that morning. Dave Nolan said, "We can't play. We're gonna have to withdraw." Okay. He's like, "Can't do that to me because I got nobody else." So we ended up playing all 3 games on that Sunday. And one of my players was like running out and throwing up and running back in and picking a dice and then running back out. It was just horrible. It was the worst day ever. We survived without any foodborne illnesses this year, so that's a victory.
Chalk that one up as a success. Yeah,
but now there's no excuses. That's the problem.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about this year's Captain's Pack was the clarity of the missions. They were very clear. They were simple and easy to understand. There was some creativity in them, which made you think. The secondary objectives were pretty fun. How did you get, this is being your first time, how did you feel about the missions?
I mean, the missions themselves, other than Penetrating Strike, we'd played them all before. We used to the missions and so on. Penetrating Strike, I enjoyed that one. It's double envelopment without running off the end of the board effectively. In terms of the secondaries, I don't think it changed how I was playing the game, in terms of, trying to neutralize, the enemy vehicles and or trying to take a cheap dice in terms of the enemy HQ. But in terms of the mission pack, it was nice and clear. We've just been at an event this weekend and we used Heartbreak Ridge in that event, and we used a description that was from the WTC pack because it's nice and clear and straightforward. And, those of us who played it before, it was easy for us to talk to our opponents if they hadn't played it and gone, this is how you play it, this is the gist of it, off you go. So
Yeah.
The missions seem like they should be so easy, and you read them in the book, they make total sense, and then you go to try to play a book mission, and immediately chaos ensues. How do I deploy? Do the spotters and snipers, do they set up first or not? Is that going to be allowed? Right? Is outflanking allowed or not? And so many of the things that you need in order to be well informed for how to play a mission very confusingly done in those book missions. And unfortunately, the game publisher came out with like a tournament pack a few years ago that's actually made it worse. I don't know if you remember it, but it didn't even say like, maybe can I put my 100% of my army in reserve? I mean, it didn't have a lot of the key rules that you need. Getting the mission clean and really simple is deceptively difficult. But when it is, it makes it such a pleasure, because then you're focused on how do I beat this guy, as opposed to do my spotters go out first or not? I don't know.
Yeah, that pre-game admin phase was just very nicely quick, because they published the missions in advance. You were able to look at your list, have a think about, okay, I've got to reserve, up to 50%, for example. What is my base kind of 50% going to be? And might change depending on my opponent and the table, but I've roughly got an idea of what I'm going to put in reserve, what I'm going to put in first wave, all that kind of stuff. So I always like it with events when the missions in advance after the lists have been submitted, because it does give you that opportunity in that period between list submission and the event to do a bit of thinking and planning for yourself. And I could imagine, for both Johnny and yourself, John, as captains, either at WTC or WoW, it makes it easier for you as captains to have, because you're able to look after yourself and also look after the team. So when you get to the table or you get to the weekend, it's a job that's already been done to a certain extent.
That's exactly right. I mean, it de-risks all of the decisions that you're trying to make, because you are the team captains here play. There's no such thing as a separate captain standing behind and giving advice. In fact, they specifically won't allow that. So the minute everyone agrees on terrain, you're playing your own game, and you have to focus on your own game. So yeah, clearly the mission pack was really critical. Now they made some interesting decisions. So there were very few missions that allowed forward deployment.
Yes,
right, there were very few. So if you had an army that relied on forward deployment as your trick, you might have walked away from this event feeling like you didn't really get the full power of your army. How did you feel about that?
I guess on the flip side, though, because we knew the missions before we submitted our lists, if you'd read the missions and then you built a list, which was, Soviet scout hunters, Soviet scouts and tank hunters, or, let's say you took the Australians and you had a bunch of Papuans and then went, oh, hang on a minute, I can only forward deploy in 2 out of 6 missions. You've kind of shot yourself in the foot. So yeah, no sympathy. Yeah. It's the short answer.
And it was quite one of the things we've seen at other tournaments in the UK is people sort of comping, sort of ruling that you can only have a certain number of forward deployers to stop people sort of abusing these specialist squads. And so actually what's quite interesting is if you just make the missions in a way that sort of hinders them, it's sort of like a soft comp on them where people are naturally not going to take as many. And I think that's quite a nice way, because you're not saying you can't have them. You're just saying it's not going to be that useful on this occasion, unfortunately.
I think there are certainly some, non-standard army lists that you can do by surprise, massive forward deployment. And there are some book missions that will massively reward you for that. And so if you're a 3-game local tournament and you build for one of those missions and you can just stomp somebody who doesn't see it coming, I was glad to see it. Then I don't play an army that has that as a benefit. So maybe others felt differently.
I played Michael Christensen from Denmark, last year with a Soviet list, and he built his, forward deploying Soviet list, and I played him in sectors. And I think Russell had slightly tweaked the wording of the deployment rules in sectors. Michael didn't deploy a single unit in his sector. All of his units that he deployed were in the neutral zone, forward deploying 12 inches away from me. And I was like, well, okay, here we go. And it was fantastic. It was exactly the right build for the mission. And also the table, really worked. I hadn't come across that sort of, army and a mission before, and was like, okay, where do we go from here, sort of thing. So,
yeah, I had a similar thing actually at WTC with I'd included Rangers for the first time in a competitive army, just because I needed some extra infantry just for sitting on objectives. And then timely objectives came up, and I realized I could lead the way onto the objective, which then meant I could go down in turn one, which made them very hard to shift. And I realized that I'd unintentionally built a really good army for playing timely objectives.
And you just announced it on your show. You could have gone the other way and go, wow, it's so
Well, no, because I quite like, so this is the thing, I quite like when someone uses those tricks against me as well. I really like when someone catches me off guard. It's one of the reasons why sort of we play these human v human games, because when you play a computer, if you've played it enough times, it gets very predictable what its reaction will be. Whereas when you play a human, there's times they'll do things where you're just like, I did not expect, or I couldn't have predicted that if you'd given me 10 years of sort of calculations. I never would have thought you'd do this thing, and it's completely thrown me off.
The psychological meta of bolt action is actually a really fun part of the game. And, people don't talk enough about, because there's units that you can bring that create psychological confusion, and there's tactics that you can do that will really put your opponent, destroy their momentum, win a game that way.
Definitely, yeah.
Of all the lists, you guys think that you brought strong enough lists for the event?
I mean, mine was the most obvious British list you could go. So obviously Bo and Russell on their video, Russell had gone through and worked out the average British list, which was, I think, three squads of Gurkhas, an engineer in a Bren, 2 Daka Stewarts, 1 land mattress, blah, blah, blah. I had 4 Gurkhas and no engineers, but I had a flamethrower in a Jeep. I had 2 land mattresses. So I basically, Michael, our captain, said, Phil, you like playing the Brits, you're strong with the Brits, take a list that you know you can do well with. And it was the most obvious, British list. And as much as it pains me to say that, it was basically, oh, look, here's Phil's British list. It's just like 14, 15 of the other, 18 British lists. So in that sense, it was as strong as I could have made it within the narrow-minded framework I was working in, which was Gurkha Stewarts and let's have a land mattress or 2.
I was disappointed I didn't bring more flamethrowers, I think. I mean, I don't think it would have made the list stronger, but because I also think that flamethrowers aren't the best thing at the minute, because there's so much stubborn, so much fanatic going around that at a competitive tournament, flamethrowers aren't where it's at. But I'll always lean that way just because it's what I love. I love getting in close and then flamethrowing, and then I really like the high stakes, high risk, high reward element of it. And so I think if I'd been building it far more competitively, I would have went another way, probably sort of a lot more BARs. Maybe he's taken 2 Stewarts instead of just 1. But really, I only put the Stewart in just because I felt I needed some long-range anti-tank and something just to hold people back. But in hindsight, I wish I'd taken 6 flamethrowers, I think.
There are people in America that would hear you say that and they would roll on the floor going, oh my God, 6 flamethrowers. That would be very unusual to see here. Mm-hmm. So I took British. I had 4 units of Gurkha paratroopers because why not?
You can, yeah.
When in Rome.
And I had a 25-pounder, always not a bad choice. But I had 2 Crusaders, the Crusader AA tanks with the double autocannons, and had 2 flame jeeps. And when I played them properly, they were really, really fun. The 2 Crusaders move up like piranhas. And they're moving up and edging around, and the Stewart can't turn. And eventually, you get a side shot, and you can kill it. And killing a Stewart with the Crusaders was a lot of fun. I don't think my list was as optimized as others, but it was different enough to have to pause and think about it. And that's kind of part of the psychological battle right there.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun list, and also the autocannons are very much in vogue at the moment, with there being so many Stewarts and Armour 8s around. The thing that you didn't have, which the British very much leaned into, was they'd added land mattresses as a generic choice, even though it's not in the game. So for anyone listening, it's not a generic choice, but they'd added it especially for this tournament. And so, of course, as the multiple rocket launchers, the only thing the Brits don't get access to, nearly every British player included one. So why didn't you go for a land mattress?
Well, it was in, it was out, it was in, it was out. Having the 25-pounder is one of those like great units because it's both a howitzer and a tank gun. Having an AP4 shot is always good. And when I play the rocket launchers, most of the time they do nothing all game. And so But what they do is they do force people who are smart to spread out.
Yep.
I forgot this rule in game 6 against Bill Martinson because he was playing British. He had a land match. I bunched up around the only building on the table, and he he punished me for that in a way that would be one of the worst drubbings I've ever had in any competitive game.
Okay.
But if you're actually paying attention, if you spread out, you don't give them easy shots, and they're so killable. That's the other thing. They're usually inexperienced. You're hitting them on 5s. You kill 2 guys and they flee. My experience has been that they're more of a psychological weapon than they actually kill a lot. But
100%. Yeah, that's what I'm using them for in my American list. I'm using them to keep you apart so that when the engineers come in with a flamethrower, they'll clear that unit, and there's not another unit within 6 inches who can then counterattack, basically, because you've spread really far out. So now your counterattack is sort of a foot away. And that's what I'm using the multiple launcher for, just to keep you nice and spread out so I can just pick you off 1 unit at a time.
So, this year, playing all stubborn, I pushed it. And I would move because you know the trick is coming, right? The Jeep or the truck is coming up, and the engineers are going to come out and shoot you with a flamethrower. And I pushed it up there with the idea that if they kill them all with a good roll, okay, I've lost a unit. But chances are they won't. And then I'll assault them back, and I'll kill them, and then I'll be next to the transport, and I'll get 2 kills out of it versus 1. And I would say that it requires a lot of courage to do it. But triggering the trap worked for me most of the time during the tournament, and it was very satisfying.
Yeah. It's why, as I say, I don't think flamethrowers are where it's at the minute. So if you are trying to get really competitive, don't lean at the barbecue list would be my advice.
Did you face any of the new Italian case blue lists?
I didn't. No, one of our players in England took Italians. He's always played Italians before Case Blue, so it's not like he changed from pre Case Blue to Case Blue. I know against Denmark, one of our players obviously played against Michael Christensen, who had Italians.
I think they're really good. I was working furiously to see if I could get mine built before the lists were turned in, and I couldn't, so I played them. But I played him. Your team 3 player. What was his name?
Owen.
Oh, yeah, great game.
Yeah.
Womble. Yeah, it was a great game. I think I won, but it was a very close game. It was so much fun. That's the new Italians rock.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
I played him in the warm-ups, and it was a lot of fun. Those cavalry that he bounced between my 2 ranger squads and took them both out against the odds, really. And I was very, very impressed with them.
So, John, looking ahead, to next year and to USA and so on, what advice would you give to anyone listening who maybe wants to go to the WTC, but is maybe, within their first year or so of playing the game and isn't quite sure what to expect? Are they good enough? How to go about it? Obviously, they need to meet those first 3 criteria in terms of availability, affordability, and permission from the other half and boss. But once that's out of the way, what kind of advice would you give to those players who are maybe thinking about it?
I think a lot of people look at big tournaments and they think, I'm not good enough, and I'm just going to get stomped and it's going to be miserable. And that would not be the case. You have a lot of people at these tournaments that are coming over and playing I would consider them good players, but they're not, like in any tournament, there's going to be a range. And there's a lot of times where teams have to bring somebody else in just to make the 4th team. So first off, let all that go. If you know how to play the game and you're excited and you want to go play in an international event and see how people from all over the world build lists and play, you should come, because it's a great learning experience. And the second, it's like a master's class, because the Europeans, in my opinion, play so much more frequently. Their tournament scenes are in many countries are much more developed. Like, you learn a lot about what's winning games and how they actually play the lists from playing. So even if you came over and you lost every game, which you won't, but even if you did, you'll walk away with a big primer to improve your game. So I think anyone who's remotely interested should raise their hand.
And it's a good point you made about the lists and so on, because you obviously, around the world, we all play in a certain way, and we have our local meta, and we maybe have our slightly spread, meta, not just locally or within one country. But the way that, you guys build a list compared to, we featured Spain's German list on the pod as one to look out for, because it's just so different to what we see. Certainly my experience at Granada and also last year at a World Open War was fantastic to see different people playing lists in different ways, in ways in which, we in the UK might look at a list and go, I don't think that's very good. It doesn't fit our expectations. It doesn't fit our norms. But then you play it, or you see it being played, and you're like, okay. My initial response of it's maybe not the greatest list. Actually, with someone who understands it and that's how they play it regularly, it completely changes the way you think about your own lists.
I think the other piece to it too, which is kind of hard to get out, it's hard to explain it to people, is just how much fun it is. Is if you come over as an American or a Canadian or something, or anybody from any country, or you're coming over, everyone is super welcoming. They're excited to see you. And afterwards in the bar, don't try to hold your own drinking against the Welsh. But it's always really, really fun, and everyone's excited that you came and really appreciative. And then you end up making these friends from all over the world that you would never have done before. It's really a lot of fun. That may be the best part.
Yeah, I'd absolutely second that. Definitely, yeah.
If anyone is interested, I'll send you my my contact information. If anyone is in the US or Canada is interested, North America is interested in going, they can reach out to me and I'll walk them through the process for next year. And we've had more and more people interested in every single year. So I'd encourage anyone who's curious just to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to take you through what it's like.
Okay, and John, so looking ahead for you for the rest of 2024, it's only early February now. What's it looking like for you in terms of bolt action and the scene down in Atlanta?
So for me personally, I'm going to go to Adepticon and a tournament. I hope they have a Historicon. So I'll have 2 major events this year. And that's probably going to be, and maybe a couple local ones, but that'll probably be the extent of my play. But I run an event called Warzone, which is a grand tournament we host in Atlanta, Warzone Atlanta. And it's a cool event. We have a Friday, lightweight, smaller format recon tournament, 750, and then there's 1,000-point unlimited platoons, unlimited dice, bring your filth kind of tournament. But there's awards for painting and sportsmanship, and everyone comes, they get an award, they get a cool template, they get a former Soviet era medal. I feed everybody. It was built. Warzone was designed against that list we talked about. You're going to do everything on this list. That would be the premium tournament. So nobody leaves the hotel because I feed you. You go in immediately and there's a huge buffet with a bunch of food and desserts and all this kind of stuff. And you don't have to worry about food. And if you're thirsty, we have bartenders that will come and bring you a beer at your table or whatever you drink. Right.
Nice.
And we start on time. We end on time. The packs go out early. The missions are play tested so that people know what to expect. And so all of the criteria to make sure that when people leave the event, they feel like it was the best one that they'd ever been to. And we typically get that kind of feedback over and over. Our repeat rate, or repeat offenders every year is really, really high. Our 40K event is usually sold out in a couple of days. And so that'll be the first weekend in December right now. And I'll send you guys some. So I'll link to the Warzone site. It's 40K. It's Age of Sigmar, and it's bolt action. And we might add a fourth Star Wars or something this year. I don't know yet.
Brilliant. Nice. Sounds fantastic.
So are you guys going to come?
I was looking at the cost of flights the other day in December to Atlanta. In all seriousness, my other half referred to it as bolt action tourism, and I think having had a great time in Granada and meeting others at WoW and Southend. There's definitely an appeal of going to Denmark or Holland or France or the US or whatever to play in bolt action events. Yeah. So I genuinely have looked at the cost of flights.
Well, I'm so glad. I promise you guys will have a great time. It'll be really fun, and the opportunity to talk about a US style tournament, grand tournament, and how that is different, how the lists are different. That would be some good content for your show. I think that people would love to hear it.
Definitely, yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, playing the international players is the big attraction, isn't it, to the international tournaments? Because you get in your little bubble in your home tournaments where everyone's sort of playing similar, and it is a lot of fun going across the world to meet brand new people who are interested in the same thing you are, because you've got this common connection, but in a slightly different sort of perspective on it.
It's not just fun and it's not just educational, but you end up making these connections. And then you're talking back and forth all year long. You're playing TTS with people from South Africa or whatever, and you end up widening your total player group. And this back and forth, and it makes you a better player.
Brilliant.
You guys should come. I'll make a special T-shirt for you. Horizontal Atlanta boxer shorts, whatever you want. You guys should come.
Sold. It was the boxer shorts. There we
Yeah,
go.
that's what we're waiting for. The offer of underwear.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, John, for taking the time to join us, and thank you for sharing your thoughts as well. And it will be a really nice contrast between your experience as a experienced international player, and then also Liam, who fresh into the game in the last year and attending his first event last weekend in Granada as well. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and I love your show. You guys do a great job.
Thanks, John.
So we're joined now by Liam, who was a member of the England C team. It was his first time playing at WTC, and also a player who hasn't played for a huge amount of time. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear his experience of the WTC, but also how he got into bolt action and what led him to being selected and coming out to Granada with the rest of us for the England team. So welcome, Liam.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Great to have you here as well. So, just casually at the start, what got you into bolt action? What's your sort of history and background as a gamer and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So bolt action was an accidental finding for me. I kind of got back into making models and things like that, like to fix models and stuff like that, probably about 18 months to 2 years ago. I put tons of time into them. I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool to be able to play with them, basically.
Yeah.
And I used to play Flames of War many moons ago, and I played a bit of 40k as well when I was younger. So I started having a bit of a scout around looking for games that were similar, and stumbled across a YouTube video by Modelling for Advantage on bolt action. And then went into a YouTube binge hole and spent an entire night watching most of their episodes on it and thought, yeah, this looks all right for me.
Yeah.
So I had an with a mate of mine who was sort of into similar things, and we agreed to go halves on the Band of Brothers box set. The starter army thing.
Nice.
Picked that up pretty cheap on eBay and built the armies and cracked on. Had a couple of play games on sort of my kitchen or dining room table with makeshift scenery and stuff like that out of cardboard boxes and all sorts.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, and within a week or so we were both hooked. Did a bit of digging, found a local club, localist to me club that play sort of every Thursday evening. Chucked them a message, see if they were still playing, because I know quite a few places didn't and stopped. So we just, but yeah. Dropped a message. They said, yeah, pop along on a Thursday. And James, who runs the little club that we've got, the little league that we've got, was very kind and basically lent me an army. Another chap lent my mate an army and said, go ham, have fun. And I've been hooked ever since. And I walked away with an airborne army that evening because it was in a shop. So I just, picked up a British airborne army and haven't looked back since.
I mean, that in itself, Liam, is a great example for Warlord of how people get into the game in terms of background in modelling or interest in the history of modelling, whatever. Do a bit of investigation, find some stuff on YouTube, start looking at the videos, get excited, go and play a game, pick up a starter box, and then off you go. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's literally sort of textbook, isn't it? Really. But for me, it was everything. I'm a massive history geek. I love the sort of all things Second World War and history in general. So for me, it was a no-brainer. It was just. All of a sudden, there's these little easy to paint figures, because anyone that's played or tried to play Flames of War will know that they are not easy to paint.
Yeah.
That are on their own individual basis as well. It's not 8 or 10 figures per base, it's one. And Flames of War, it's not a besmirchment of Flames of War in the slightest, but it's company scale or even sort of brigade scale if you really want to go into it. Whereas I like bolt action because it's platoon or armored platoon or whatever you want to play. And it's, for me, it was a nice game to get into, and I quite like the rules as well. They're fairly easy to pick up and follow, which is a big bonus because I'm thick as 2 short planks.
And less of a car park for your tanks as well, bolt action compared to Flames of War.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what kind of timescales are we talking about? Because obviously we were chatting away, over the weekend in Granada, and you haven't been playing for that long relative to a lot of other players who were out there.
Pretty much, just over a year and a week now. I started in the first week of February when I tipped up to the league, tipped up to the shop. I think I picked up the Band of Brothers box set a wee bit before then, but I sort of classed myself as starting to play when I joined the league. And literally pretty much a year. I think Granada was nigh on a year to the day when I started playing. So it was quite a quick turnaround, really. But I really got into it, and I'm one of those people, when I get a hobby that I'm really into, I'll throw everything at it for months on end. And not really relent.
Yeah, as I think a lot of us are, to be fair.
Yeah.
in the game. So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Liam, that's phenomenal. You know, a year from playing in your first league to being selected and going out to Granada. In terms of like in between, obviously you're playing in the league. Were you playing in other local events, other sort of regional or national events?
Yeah, so in the last year I did 3 whole tournaments.
Okay.
My first was the Juggernaut tournament, not 4 steps back.
Mm-hmm.
That was a litmus test for me because I'd never done a tournament before. And I went with the attitude of, I might learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Went along, had fun, got tabled by Alan Wells, which most people have at some point in their bolt action career. But thoroughly enjoyed it. And actually did all right. I think I placed 4th or 5th. I did all right.
Nice.
Placed 4th or 5th in that. And then we did the local shop where they do the league. Steve
Mm-hmm.
ran a tournament. There were about 20 of us that tipped up to that. I won that one. Did all right in that one.
Brilliant.
So second ever tournament, won that one. And then I did a pairs tournament, the Warlord pairs tournament. I think it was August, maybe.
Okay.
I did that with Phil Crowcroft, also from Team C. Phil and I went to Warlord together, $750 each. Both played Brits because British meta, obviously. And yeah, again, we won that as well. And not long after that, Martin, who's the captain of Team C, approached both Phil and I and said, do you want to tag along to Granada?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we both, Martin plays in our league. We both played against him, got on really well with him. And he won't like me saying this, but I don't think I've ever lost to him. I know once, but I was Italian, so it doesn't count.
Fair enough.
So yeah, we both got invited and both gained permission and said yes. So yeah, it was, like I said, it's been a very, very quick turnaround and a bit of a trial by fire, but I'm pleased I did it. Really am pleased that I did it. And it's been very, very good.
Cool.
Very good. And I was very privileged and flattered to be invited because I thought, well, like we're having this conversation now, I've only been playing a year, so I was very surprised. But I'm pleased, very pleased and grateful.
And I guess, Liam, moving on from that, going into Granada then, so you've been asked to play, you've been accepted onto the team, sort of back end of last year, kind of like September time or so, yeah. So you got 4, 5, 6 months or so to build up into it. What was that like, thinking about it and looking at the lists and obviously joining the rest of the guys on the Discord and the chats and so on?
It was quite daunting.
Mm-hmm.
There's some very, very, very established players in sort of all 3 of the teams that have been playing for years, some of them going back for sort of 6, 7 years, if not longer. The likes of Alan have been playing since V1. Martin's been playing for a long time. I know all the Juggers have been playing for a long time. It was quite a daunting task because there's me sat there with my brand new American army that I'd never played before thinking, how the hell am I going to fit in with all this?
Yeah.
So initially it was daunting, but everyone was very friendly and welcoming and there was some good banter going around the Discord chat. So that was reassuring. And I sort of threw together my army because prior to Granada, I only had 2 armies. One was Italian, one was British.
Mm-hmm.
Phil plays incredibly well with his Brits, so I didn't want to take that away from him. He's a very, very good British player.
Mm-hmm.
And we obviously have Womble as well, who's our resident Italian expert. I didn't deign to challenge him on his Italian prowess either. And I think he only has Italians, so he didn't really have 2 choices, which kind of left me thinking, well, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who already owned 2 Stuarts, I thought, well, I'll go American then, because I can still feel my Stuarts.
Sure. And
I planned on putting a 75mm pack howitzer on the table as well, but that went out the window because I discovered land mattresses.
Yeah.
So yeah, threw together the army, had a few practices which sort of bolstered my confidence a wee bit. But yeah, very daunting, but rewarding at the same time.
Nice. How did you get on over the weekend then with your 2 Stuarts and your land mattresses?
I did okay. I won 3, lost 3. So 50%. I'm not to be sniffed at. And to be fair, reflecting on it, the losses that I had, one of them was a big loss. I did get tabled. But the other 2 were actually, on reflection, very, very close. There were only a few points in it. Lucky draw of a dice or lucky roll of a dice, it would have gone the other way. So I'm pleased with that. And the 3 games that I lost were all against first teams. I lost to Italy 1, who I think, did they come 2nd or 3rd?
They came 3rd.
Yeah, so lost to Italy 1, who were 3rd place. Not bothered about that. Played, I felt, fairly well and had a very, very good game against, I think his name was Sert, with his Italian list. Very good game. Learned a lot. Lovely chap to play. Lost to USA 1 again. Really friendly team, very, very good players, very experienced players. And that was on my least favourite one as well. Was it Heartbreak Ridge, I think, where you get all the enemies to the back of the board?
Penetrating
attacks. Yeah, that one. I hate that one. It's my least favourite. And he had a Russian list with 8 things in outflank, so I was never going to win that.
And then you played Denmark 1 as well?
That's right, yeah. Lost to Denmark 1. Lost to David from Denmark 1, which was an Emery match. 2 American teams, and he won on turn 7. So, I'm not going to grumble about that. It was a very good game, and I learned something from every game, and had an enjoyable time with all the games as well. Everyone that I played was incredibly friendly. and very forgiving and very nice. Because I always introduce that I'm new, I'm going to get stuff wrong, I'm really sorry, and I've been playing for a year, but I'm still make silly mistakes and get rules slightly wrong and forget stuff. So please bear with me if I have to ask lots of questions. And they were all great. They were all really, really good, and nobody sort of groaned or moaned because I was getting the odd rule here and there wrong. So yeah, it was good. It was really good.
Brilliant.
But the wins that I had, I was chuffed with. They were solid wins, and as a team, we cleaned up quite well. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I mean, as a team, England C finished 7th overall, which
That's
was
right, yep.
Yeah, fantastic result. Higher than England B. So yeah, very, very good result. And certainly,
you mean next year's England C?
Well, yeah, obviously, we'll see what happens in 11 and a bit months' time.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, fantastic results, and all 4 of you guys did brilliantly. Yeah,
yeah,
well
we all thoroughly enjoyed it. Phil did even better than I did. He came 16th overall. I think I came 23rd or 24th or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And Womble did well. He came 32nd overall. So 3 of the 4 team members were in the top half.
Yeah,
overall, which we were very, very pleased with. We won't talk about the captain.
It's a team format, isn't it?
After all, so
yeah,
yeah. But then Martin won a game when we all lost. So
yeah.
And he's a very good player. Martin's a very good player. He just had a list of Russians that he played twice.
And a KV as well, didn't he?
And a KV too. He loves a big tank, bless him. Every time I played him as Germans, he always turns up with a bloody Sturm Tiger. Every time. But it serves a purpose.
Some people just like the punishment, don't they?
They do. They like the big tanks. They like the punishment. I don't think I've ever played Martin when he's not put a big tank on the board. He usually runs Germans, and I said he's always got a Sturm Tiger or at least a Tiger on the board. Something big and ridiculous and easily breaks down because German. Yeah, he's a very good player.
Fantastic. What did you think of the tables at the tournament? How did they compare to the sort of stuff you're playing on normally?
Very, very similar, actually. We lay our tables out the same way like most people do. They are 2D tables because we don't have the money to build big, fancy 3D things like they've got at Warlord. And like I know Russell's got a few, hasn't he?
Yeah, World Up More. He's very keen on his big valleys and stuff, and it does make it's a beautiful game to look at, but it does make it a little bit more complex when you're like, can I see over this house that if I'm on top of the hill, can I see over the house into the valley? So actually I don't mind the 2-dimensional element personally.
No, I said I'm used to 2D tables. I've played at Warlord a couple of times on like their Normandy table and stuff like that, where they've got a bit of a valley in the middle and a river and stuff like that, and they're fun to play on, but you're right, it does add a complication to it. But no, I did enjoy the tables. There were a couple of tables that I didn't enjoy playing. The foresty one where there was just trees.
The winter table, yeah.
The winter table. Nothing but trees. And I played against Denmark 1. I mean, they're Danish. They're used to trees and snow, aren't they? So I was always at a disadvantage straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, they brought their skis, didn't they?
They did, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, but no, I think that was the only table that I didn't overly enjoy. But even then, it was still a great game. It was still a great game to play. But I think for the whole, they were well laid out, well thought out. The matching terrain was nice. Everyone was pretty open, talking about sort of cover and stuff like that beforehand, and what is what and what you can and can't go over the tank and stuff like that, which was really good. So I think for the most part, yeah, the tables were well laid out. I'd have liked a little bit more space for putting your boxes and your trays and stuff on. That'd have been really nice to have. Would have been a little bit more space. But at the same time, it's a massive hall full of 500 gamers, so space is a premium, isn't it? So it swings and roundabouts. It would have been nice to have, but I know it wouldn't have been easy.
I think, there was a lot of space around the tables. Like, it didn't feel like you were playing on top of each other, but you're right that the actual...
No, not at all.
Having space on the tables in the area to put your dice down, to put your miniatures down, all that kind of stuff.
Or even just a foot between the mats kind of thing, just to be able to put your tray on. So you're not sort of putting your tray on the table or on the floor when you're deploying would have been really useful to have. But it didn't slow it down, really.
No.
It just saved my back a little bit, bending down all the time.
Yeah. I think we all said it on the Monday. We all definitely felt like we played, 6 games over the 2 days, and they were long days as well. The breaks were nicely spaced out. You weren't having a 15-minute turnaround. There's a decent amount of time for a break, but it did obviously extend the playing time, which then 100%. Extended, the evening activities as a consequence knocking on. So
absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot to pack into 2 days. Heck of a lot to pack into 2 days. But well worth it. Well worth it. I'd do it again tomorrow. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, that was going to be the next question. Did you enjoy it? And would you do it again? But I guess you've already answered it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was different. It was different. I've never done a 2-day tournament. That's my first 2-day tournament.
Okay.
So it was a bit of a rude awakening because, normally you do a 1-day tournament, you go in with a bit of a headache and a sore back and sore hamstrings. You get all that from the first day of WTC and then you have to go and do it all over again.
Yeah.
So you wake up the next morning with a bit of a heavy head. and generalised sort of aches and pains, then it's oh, by the way, you're playing Denmark 1, and it's sort of oh god. Again, you get into it quickly. A couple of coffees, maybe a sneaky rum and coke with your breakfast, and it's all is well again. So yeah, it was thoroughly enjoyable, and I'd gladly do it again.
Brilliant. What does the next 12 months look like for you, Liam? So, with the goal in mind of going against WTC 2025, what are you going to be planning on?
More tournaments. So I've got Not 5 Steps Back next month, which is the next Juggers one.
Yeah.
I'm potentially going to do the British Open, maybe a couple of others as well, sort of work and family permitting and stuff like that. Restart. We've got another league starting soon, so I'll play in that. And I think as well, I really want to develop my American list because I can't believe I'm saying this. I really enjoy playing as America. Didn't think I would. I thought it'd be an army that I bought just for the WTC and then put back on a shelf and never looked at again. But actually, really like it.
Yeah.
Really like it. And I think I'll probably use it in the next league as well. And then I'll probably build another army just for a bit of fun on the side. So yeah, pretty much tournaments, league, and more painting and more modelling that I always put on a shelf and forget about.
Cool.
As is the done thing. He says sat here staring at sort of 50 odd unpainted Italians.
So we asked this question to John Ross as well. So if there's anyone out there listening who hasn't, been to WTC but would like to go and is thinking about it, what top tips would you give them as somebody who's, just to reiterate, has gone, a year beforehand playing in their first league game to getting on that plane and doing fantastically well as an individual and as a team in Granada?
I think the biggest and best tip I can give you would be to know your own list, know your own army, and know the own rules that go with it. Having come from sort of a friendly league background and you're playing against somebody who knows your army and knows your sort of special rules, they'll say, oh, actually, you can do that. WTC is not as forgiving. A couple of times I forgot about having played as British and Italians and nothing else. I'd forget the American rule of not being able, or like the no -1 for coming on from the side of the board, kind of thing off from reserve. I'd forget that. And then I'd roll, say, oh, I can't come on. Having rolled a 9, could have come on. But then they don't forgive that quite so much because it's a competition. I would expect them to. So yeah, that probably the best piece of advice I could give would be know what your army can do.
Yeah.
Know your rules, know what your army can do, know your special rules, whatever you need to, learn it, know at the back of your hand, don't forget it. Because again, my Americans, I played them 5 times before I went. So I was still quite new to playing as the US of A. So yeah, best I can give is prep well in advance, get your army ready, do lots of practice games and learn your list and learn your rules. I'd also strongly recommend taking some ibuprofen and paracetamol because you will get a sore throat.
Yeah.
Your back will hurt, your legs will hurt. Stay hydrated as well. It's bloody warm.
I mean, less of a problem in, Manchester, Stockport in 2025, but yeah. Yeah.
Even in the UK, because we don't have aircon, you put 30 people in close quarters, it gets
warm.
Pretty toasty, doesn't it?
It does. It's going to get sweaty. But then we're gamers, we're used to sweatiness.
Yeah. But bringing water is the top tip.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us just forget about.
Yeah. So somebody said, like, go to Lidl, get 6 litres of water. And I thought, that'll be all right. End of the first day, I was straight into Lidl, straight in there because I just thought, got silly. Because if you don't have it with you, you forget. And there's not enough time in your games to go, just hold on for 5 minutes. I'm just going to get a bottle of water. Can't do that. 2.5 hour timer against 23 Russians. You can't just all of a sudden stop the game to go and have a drink. So yeah, preparing would be sort of a generalized big tip. Water, painkillers, food, whatever you need. Make sure you got it all. Yeah, I can't think of anything else really that would be.
No? Was there anything else you wanted to talk about? Or?
I mean, can I give a shout out?
Yeah, give a shout out.
Yeah. So big shout out to Dice Cavern Games in Grantham. It's where we play our league. Steve's a great bloke, runs a great shop. If you are remotely Lincolnshire, Leicestershire, or whatever, have a look. We run a league every Thursday night. Come along and have a go.
Brilliant. How does the league function? Is it like points for a win, and then at the end there's an overall winner, or is it less formal than that?
No, pretty much. It's pretty much exactly what you said, which is points for a win. We do secondary and tertiary as well. Not a full-on Swedish system, but not far off. But it essentially runs like the Premier League. It's points at the end of the day kind of thing. And then if there's a decider that needs to be had, then it's based on kills. And James gives out little prizes for sort of tank kills or wooden spoon or most kills or whatever. And he includes a kill-death ratio as well, which I quite like.
Yeah, that's nice.
So yeah, we're running it on the Jugger pack at the minute, which is good. We ran it on standard rules last time. This time round, it's on the Juggers format, which is throwing some interesting results.
I can imagine, yeah.
Everyone's got medium machine guns all of a sudden.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
Brilliant.
I imagine Martin will love it because he gets to take German tanks at a cheaper price.
Yep. Again, every game, Sturm Tiger without fail.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the exact points are, but it's a massive discount. So like 500 to 300 odd.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
sure he'd take one at 700 points though, equally.
He would. Yeah. Even if it meant that all of his other units were green, he'd still do it.
Yeah.
Just like his Soviets. Again, all green, big tank.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much for coming on to talk to us about your first experience at WTC.
Absolute pleasure.
It sounds like you'll be at the next one. So anyone listening who's planning to go to the next one, look out for Liam. He'll be in one of the England teams. We don't know which one yet, I imagine.
Still going to get invited back, but yeah, fingers crossed. I think we've got to do 4 teams this year, so I have reasonably high hopes.
Well, 3 wins is not a bad result.
I'll hopefully see you all there. Should be good. And I'll try and get to World Open War if I can as well, or another tournament down south.
Yeah, well, we're going to run the qualifiers for that at the end of May as the current holding date. So the pack will be released for that probably in the next week or so. But effectively, there's only going to be one, because it's a 16-team format, because he does his 4 groups of 4 teams. We're expecting there to be one England team, but we'll also potentially have a reserve team if we do get an international dropout. And so because of that, because there's only 3 places effectively, there's going to be a proper qualifier end of May. And as I said, details to come.
Excellent. I'll keep my eyes peeled then.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you there. Because even if you don't make the actual team, the qualifiers I'm expecting will be a lot of fun, because it's going to be sort of a full weekend of gaming where it is just sort of no apologies, very competitive, which is quite a rare thing in the UK generally.
Yeah,
we have quite a lot of sort of mixed theme, don't we? And we tend to sort of pull our punches a little bit, and so it's quite fun just to have a weekend where hopefully no one will get upset if you just bring your filth and take no prisoners. Brilliant.
Yeah, it should be good. On that note, speaking of filth, can I pester you for some advice very briefly on American lists?
Yeah, go on.
I want to get rid of my Stuart, one of the Stuarts, and keep one of them. I want to put a 105 Sherman in.
Nice, yeah.
Question is do I do it veteran or regular?
That is the eternal question, isn't it? Yeah, because I assume you're asking that because you played David at WTC, because I faced off against him as well, and it's intimidating, isn't it? That 105. Yeah. I got quite lucky because what I did was I sacrificed my recce Jeep to use as cover, and I just put it between the 105 and the Rangers. Yeah. I've ran the 105 veteran before, and it is really nice when in first wave missions. So I'd say it's pack dependent. So if it's a pack where the missions are first wave or you plan to reserve it, rolling on with no net -1 for movement and firing that HE is very tasty. But I think, it's one of those ones where I think it depends on your list, rather than, you know, how there's some pieces of advice that are sort of universally true, and then there's other things that are very subjective. And I think that's one of those questions that I think will come down to your play style and your list.
Fair. Okay. I mean, it'd be essentially a copy and paste for the list wise. The only difference is I'd be dropping one of the land mattresses in favour of 2 heavy mortars, or 2 medium mortars, sorry, 2 inexperienced medium mortars. So essentially to make it's built with regular at the minute, to make it veteran, I'd just drop one of those 2 mortars and a BAR from somewhere or 5 points from somewhere else, just to try and buff it up to veteran. It's just whether or not it's worth doing or not. I really can't decide. I don't know what to do.
I would play test it, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's the only way forward, isn't it? This is because the best laid plans and all that.
Yeah, good point. Well presented.
Yeah.
In the league, are you able to change your list halfway through?
Yeah. You can bring a different list every single game if you want to. As long as it's the same army, you can bring a different list every time.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so it's not sort of strict. You must stick to one list.
In. Yeah, okay.
No, which was really useful to me when I started playing, because I turned up with British Airborne plus Navy RE and fairly swiftly hated it. So was able to chop and change, and all of a sudden engineers and Bren gun carriers and all sorts of wonderful British things. But yeah, so the league's really well run, actually. I quite like the way that we do it. It's not overly strict. Everyone's quite friendly. It's turn up and have a bit of fun, and it's a pleasure to play.
Brilliant.
But yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Have a chop and change. Cheers for having me on, gents. I've appreciated it, and it's been fun.
Thanks for joining us.
Well, yeah, hopefully we'll get to see you at some events at some point.
What have you guys got lined up?
So we're both going to the Welsh Nationals.
Ooh, when's that?
First weekend in May bank holiday weekend in Cardiff. I'll be at the Warlord GT in August.
I've been looking at that as well, but I just don't like the fact that you have to pay for a ticket to get into the event and then pay for your Oh no, sorry, no.
No. So
No,
Warlord
about-
GT, the Expo is
thinking the Expo,
the Battle of Britain at the Expo is the one where you got to buy the Expo ticket and you got to buy the tournament tickets, like I think 16 quid or something. It's not a lot at all, but when you add on the tournament, the event ticket, it's really expensive. Yeah, Warlord GT is in Nottingham, August, like second weekend in August, I think. Third weekend. 1,100 points, single platoon generic. It's the same format as World Open War. So it'll be the same as a qualifier because Johnny's going to run the same, obviously, pack, or Russell's going to run the same pack. And then we've got the Welsh Open in September in Cardiff. And then.
Are there 2 Welsh Opens then?
There's the Welsh Open and Welsh Nationals. So the Welsh Nationals in May is 12.50 double generic, bring all your filth. And then the Welsh Open is nice and fluffy and friendly, albeit with a lot of competitive players. So
and it's Axis versus Allies. So rather than Swiss pairings, it's basically you take a step to the left. And so it's always Axis versus Allies. You never get blue on blue. And because it is sort of your fun thematic, as I say, you just basically, it's a bit of a random draw of who you're going to play. Usually, Mark will pair it so that you get at least 1 or 2 very thematic games, like your DAC going against the Desert Rats in the desert.
Yeah, cool.
But other than that, you just sort of, it's who comes up effectively.
Sounds good.
And then there's Warfare in November, second weekend in November in Farnborough.
Oh, Farnborough, okay.
Farnborough, yeah. So for us down this way, you've got. Beachhead is the weekend just gone. So Beachhead in Bournemouth in February.
Cracking turnout for that, wasn't it? It was 40 odd players.
44. Yeah. It was bigger than any UK event last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So you got Beachhead, then you go Welsh Nationals. There's English Nationals at Roll Call, which is in April in Milton Keynes.
Oh, I'm on holiday. I've looked at that one. I'm on holiday for that one. Is it second or third week of April?
Yeah, we're not going. Well, I'm not going. Johnny might.
I'm not going either.
Okay, yeah, we're not going. Yeah. So you go Beachhead and then, Welsh Nationals. You've got BritCon, Warlord GT, Battle of Britain, Warfare, Welsh Open. So there's probably six or 7 decent 2-day events.
Pretty good.
Brilliant.
Yeah, wicked.
Cool.
Thank you, Jeps.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Good stuff. Cheers, mate. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Liam. Bye.
Cheers, Jeps. Bye.
So once again, huge thank you to John and Liam for joining us to talk through their experiences of WTC. And a huge thank you to all the players at WTC for really enjoyable tournament. I think everyone had a great time and there were no major controversies. So that ultimately is full credit to the Bolt Action community for such a successful tournament, as well as obviously the organisers.
So massive well done and congratulations to Dave Nolan and Craig for putting on the event, not just the Bolt Action event, but also Middle-earth and Star Wars Legion. A huge thank you and well done to the TO team, so Dan, Spurley and Pete. And also just thanks to all the England players across all 3 teams. It was a great weekend and really enjoyed going across to Granada with all you guys. As ever, if you've enjoyed the episode, please do like, share and subscribe.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.